Hello? Just checking to see how many people are coming on. How do I check it? Hello, sorry I'm late. I had technical issues trying to log onto my MacBook and it wasn't working, so logged onto my phone, and now I just need to see if anybody can see. Starting to see people are logging on. Good evening, Mark. Brilliant, it's working. That's great. So what I'm going to do is, apologies for keeping you a bit late to start. I will finish a bit later if necessary. I don't mind doing that, but I'll give it a few minutes just so people can log on, and then I will and then we'll crack on. Evening, Janet. Would somebody please just let me know if you can hear me? Somebody just give me a shout if you can hear me in the comments, please. Hopefully you can. Brilliant. Okay, we'll just do 1 or 2 more minutes. Hi Louise, 1 or 2 more minutes and then we'll crack on. Just in these next couple of minutes, if you could be thinking of anything that you have been wanting to ask but not had the chance, that'd be brilliant. And at some point soon you will get the chance to ask that, and hopefully I can give you some advice. Thanks, Bev. How are you? Okay, so I can already see some names in here that I've seen before, but for those of you that haven't seen me before, my name's Josh. I work at Summit Physiotherapy. We have a few clinics around the northwest. We've got one in Chorley, one in Bolton, and one in Wrightington. What we specialise in is injury prevention. We work with a lot of runners, and I think that's why we were a good logical choice to work with yourselves who are training to do the Bolton Marathon in the next 12 months. And so yeah, I get my experience from there, constantly on the edge of learning, reading around the new research about what is a good way to not get injured, how to manage injuries effectively, where to rest, where not to rest. It's kind of one of the things that I enjoy doing the most, so hence why you've got me for this probably a bit of a long-winded spiel. I should probably make you aware that a lot of this you shouldn't really take as specific injury advice, especially if you've not had an assessment, just because self-diagnoses can often be wrong, which would lead to wrong advice and you not getting the advice, and you not getting the outcome that you would want from the advice that you were given. I will try my best to be as specific as possible, but I think it'd just be, if nobody minds, I think it'd be a good place to start in just a really basic understanding of what actually causes an injury, because without a really basic understanding, I think it's very difficult to wrap your head around what you actually have to do to stop yourself getting injured. We follow a model in physiotherapy of injury called the load and capacity model. The load and capacity model states that every tissue in your body, we call anything a tissue, whether that be an eyelid, a toenail, a bone, a muscle, a tendon, it's all a tissue in this model. Every tissue has its own capacity, and everything that you do with your body is put some sort of load on it. So whether you drop a plug on your toe, that's a sharp increase in load that hits the toe, or whether you are running 20 miles a day, that's load going through the tissue. So each specific tissue, each muscle, each tendon has its own capacity level. When the load that you choose to put through the tissue exceeds the capacity level, that's when you get injured. That is the most basic understanding of what an injury is, what causes an injury, and understanding that allows you to know what you can do to get better, because often getting better is just bringing that load down below the capacity. It's not stopping completely, but it's just coming below that capacity in order to have this bit of wiggle room to heal. So often when you go to physio, you get told to rest, you get told to stop running. Sometimes it's true, but most of the time you just have to modify what you're doing to take specific load away from the thing that's sore or injured or not doing very well. There's so many things that you can do in order to reduce your likelihood of becoming injured. So one of the most important things you can actually do is your strength and conditioning. And strength and conditioning, what it essentially does to this model is where your capacity is here, you try to bring your capacity further up, so you've got a much significantly lower chance of becoming injured by exceeding that capacity with the load that you want to put through by competing in running. We in physio have some specific exercises which we think kind of target the major areas where people are likely to become injured, and at Summit we can send anybody who wants it, they can drop us an email and we can send that. It's something that I put together for a previous talk around core stability and strength, and I'm happy to send that out because the exercises are perfectly safe for everybody to do, and I think they're a really good idea. Now, I don't want to rabbit on because there's a million ways we could go on about how to reduce injury, so I thought what would probably be the best is if everybody had their own specific questions about their ways to reduce injury. Now, we'll spend some time addressing people's injuries and concerns that they have got. However, I'd like to start with injury prevention, because prevention is by far the best cure to a running injury. It always is and always has been. So does anybody have any specific questions? And also, when I have this discussion with patients in clinic, this often covers things like, what shoes should I wear? Are my shoes giving me knee ache? Are my shoes giving me foot ache or plantar fasciitis or back pain? I'm more than happy to receive any questions like that. But yeah, just have a think and fire them in. There is one question in here, and I think it is about an injury, and I'm just going to have a quick look at that. So I can deal with that, but I'm struggling with my right calf. Also, if anybody would like to join me in the live, I'm more than happy to accept you in, so you can ask your question and I can answer it in some sort of discussion with you. Deal with that calf right now. Heather, if you don't mind, that is a question that I will answer, because there's quite a lot to that. That is a question that I will answer personally with you. Does anybody have any questions regarding injury prevention or anything like that? If not, there's a topic that I would like to cover. I'll just give it a couple of minutes to see if any come in. If not, there's a topic I would like to cover, because I think that it's something that you could, as runners, often gain a lot of value on, and that is the topic of overpronation in shoes and gait analysis. If there's no questions, I'm just going to do it. So, overpronation, I only bring this up because I see a lot of runners, and often one of the questions that I'm asked is around overpronation, because it's one of the things that is almost demonized in running. It's almost like, is my overpronation causing, and then you can add any injury to the end of that question and it becomes a valid question. Now, pronation as a concept is a really natural thing, and it's actually very important in the way that we run. All it is the way that your body reduces the effort to get your foot off the floor, essentially, and it's something that we should be doing. Now, overpronation is something that is overdiagnosed, I'm going to say, in the shoe shops. The shoe industry has done a brilliant job of scaring everybody half to death around this topic of pronation, so that they can sell shoes to prevent your overpronation. When we look at the scientific literature, there isn't a large amount of evidence to say that overpronation actually causes many injuries at all. Now, certain injuries such as shin splints, which we call medial tibial stress syndrome, they have a stronger correlation with overpronation, but they aren't but there is nothing to say that your overpronation causes this injury. And I only bring this up because it's a question that's on the front of a lot of people's minds when they come to see me around are my shoes causing my issue, and often they're not. So the second question usually comes in at what shoes should I be wearing then? And I'm not a running shoe specialist. There are people that train in that, and I don't want to discredit them. But as far as we are concerned, what shoe you should be wearing in order to prevent your risk of injury going up is just the shoe that is most comfortable, that allows you to run in your natural gait. That somebody wants to come live. I'm going to accept this and hope that it's not an accident. We've got somebody that wants to come and join us. I hope it's not an accident if I'm adding you in. Yeah, apologies. Yeah, so that's the kind of thing that I wanted to talk about. Now, if anybody has got any suggestions of where you would like me to be more specific, because I've come on here just as a Q&A, I didn't have anything overly prepared. It's just I wanted to, any questions that were at the front of your mind around your training, I wanted to be able to just give some guidance, really. Fair enough. If there's no questions, I'll answer my own next question. I'm going to accept this one, and again, hope that it isn't an accident. That's a good question, Claire. I will answer this if the person that has requested to join the live isn't an accident. Okay, I'll begin answering anyway whilst it's adding them in. How often would you benefit from a sports massage is a really, really good question. It depends. The answer is it depends, and that is a rubbish answer, and I know, and I apologise. What the things you've got to consider are: one, how quickly do you recover naturally? If whoever that was wants to try again, I will accept you again. How quickly do you recover after you've been for a run? What is your training schedule like? Are you currently increasing the amount that you're training? Do you get injured a lot? Do you constantly feel tight? And the answer to those questions then tells you how often you would benefit from a sports massage. Now, being entirely truthful, a sports massage doesn't do a whole lot to prevent your injuries by itself. What it does is it allows you to recover quickly, or it helps you to recover quickly, which then doesn't make you move. When you've not recovered well, you end up moving funny, and that puts load through tissues. So having sports massages prevents you from moving funny, which prevents you from overloading. So in answer to your question, most people would benefit from a sports massage probably once a month. Elite athletes come once or twice a week, but I think once a month or twice a month is perfectly acceptable. Andy, hello. What strength would you recommend that I could do at home to benefit my training? That is a brilliant question, and thank you for asking that. Andy, I don't know if you caught the first bit, but I did mention that the program that I've put together previously, regarding strength you can build up, I am happy to send that out. But in general, I want to say that as a runner, the best place you're going to benefit from is core stability. And core stability doesn't necessarily mean doing sit-ups and planking, whilst those things might be great in their own right. Doing core stability will be doing things, from where I'm concerned, to train your glutes and your obliques. They're the muscles in your bum, and they're the muscles that run up the side of your abs. These things provide stability whilst you are running. And in order to train these muscles effectively, the easiest way to do it is to, wherever you're training or wherever you're doing strengthening, try to put yourself on one leg. If you're on one leg, these muscles have to work a lot harder in order to give you stability. And they are the same muscles that are going to work when you're running, because when you think about running, it's just a series of hops from one leg to another, to another, to another. So something like a rear foot elevated squat is a brilliant exercise to do, or a single leg glute bridge. In all honesty, I think a single leg glute bridge, if you get good at a single leg glute bridge and you become strong and effective at it, you are going to really, really reduce your risk of injury in all of the areas that people typically tend to get injured when they're training for long distance events. Um, and we are more than happy to send these exercises out as videos, so that if what I'm talking about is just alien to you, which I understand it might be, there would be some cues on this video sheet. So if you just drop a message on Facebook, I'm more than happy to fire them out. Another question, but thanks for that, Andy. I suffer from extensive tendonitis. Would running more trials after services be more beneficial to help strengthen the tendons, or should I stick to the roads? I like to mix the terrain runs but focus more on the road. That is a brilliant question for anybody who has read it. Your extensive tendonitis, another rubbish answer is it kind of depends. So if you are running a lot, and it's partly what you prefer, but equally it's what do you feel after you've done the run on the different terrains. Now, the general best answer is to always try to mix it up, because the more you do the same thing over and over, the more, one, you become used to it, and then two, after you've become used to it and you carry on doing the one thing, whether that's running on the roads all the time or running the same route all the time, you then increase your likelihood of overloading in those specific areas. So to mix it up is by far the best thing that you can do. But whilst you are in a state where you have extensive tendonitis, it's best to listen to your symptoms. And if you can run 12 miles on the road but only 4 miles on the trail, then tailor it to your training goal, it's probably best to stick to the road for a while whilst your symptoms are calming down and you are doing the work that you would need to do to strengthen up that tendon, if that makes sense, the question. But that as an answer, but that is a brilliant question, so thank you very much for that. Also, is cupping actually beneficial, or is it a waste of money? I don't mean to be blunt, and if there is anybody in here that does cupping, but no, it is not beneficial. Not as far as my understanding goes. When we look in physiotherapy and medicine at what is beneficial, we have to look at what the data says actually works. So we try to have a control group that doesn't have X modality, whether that be cupping or shockwave or ultrasound, and then a group that will have it. And in order to say it's beneficial, there has to be better results in the group that has the modality. Now, in any of the studies I've come across, cupping doesn't bring any effects that are more beneficial than anything else, and anything else could even include nothing. So essentially what you get with cupping is a sense that you are doing something to feel better, which there's something to be said for, is pretty useful. And you get bruises, which kind of, as you see it, you think, yeah, that must have done something. Otherwise, it's just big bruises that are left on you. So it's not something that I would personally recommend, just based on the evidence that I've read. But just because the evidence says it doesn't mean it won't work for you. But you would be better off going getting a massage for that kind of recovery, for that increased recovery, so that you could get back to your training as soon as possible. Well, thanks, Mark Nixon, for the question. Any tips for plantar fasciitis, please? Yes. Tips for anything is always going to be manage your load wherever possible. So manage your load. Personally, any physio you go to will have their own kind of way that they gauge your tolerance. I like to have a rule where, if you imagine your pain scale, if 10 out of 10 is the worst pain in the whole world and 0 is no pain, then if you can run and keep yourself at around a 4 out of 10, then I don't believe that you are doing yourself you're not going to make that plantar fasciitis any worse. Now, once you get to the point where you breach that 4 or 5 out of 10 rule, then you probably should dial it back, because you're more than likely going to flare up your condition and give yourself a bad few days. Now, when we go back to that load and capacity model that I spoke about, that I opened with, for anybody that missed it, it's basically there's a capacity at a tissue and there's a load you put through it. If you exceed the capacity, you end up injured. As with regards to plantar fasciitis, we have to look at ways that we can either increase the capacity of the plantar fascia or decrease the load. Now, that may well be going to see a physiotherapist and getting your biomechanics checked in your run to see that you're not overloading the plantar fascia. Or it may well be doing some strengthening exercises such as heel raises, and you would usually have to be heavier than you would expect it to be in order for you to then put the work in to increase that capacity. How much time, I don't know what for. What percentage of my training should be focused on injury prevention and S&C? That is an excellent question. That is my favourite question. And it's not one that I've ever actually been asked before. I would suggest that if you were to put 20%, 20 to 25 to 30% of your training into strength and conditioning. Now, strength and conditioning doesn't have to be in the gym. The beautiful thing about running is it's a body weight sport, so you can do a lot of strength and conditioning from home. And you can also put some of your strength and conditioning into your running warm-ups. Some of it can just be glute medius activation, for example. The more you activate a muscle, the stronger it becomes, because it's more readily available to be used. So, 25 to 30%, I would say, would be more than enough. The other athletes that we work with tend to have 25% there. But with running, there's lots of other things you can do in order to reduce your risk of the injury, such as making sure that with a running coach, your running technique is good. That is that alongside 20% doing exercises in order to strengthen the muscles which tend to be a bit weaker, I think would be absolutely perfect. Would you advise running and S&C on the same day, or do them separately and have a full rest day, or do S&C in different days? From Mark. That is another really good question, and I thank you for these. They are actually they're pretty challenging questions. Would I advise them be done on the same day or separately? Now, ideally, we want them done you would do them on separate days. And again, always take it back to that load and capacity. If you've trained doing weights, you've already filled up the load on that bar you can fill up. So you're already reaching the capacity limit. So if you were then to run on the same muscles you've just trained, you are increasing the likelihood of breaching that threshold and becoming injured or sore. So ideally, you'd want to do them on separate days, but there's other things to factor in, such as would you have DOMs, and is that going to ruin your run? And also, sorry, I just lost my train of thought. And a full rest day, or do S&C in different days? Ideally, a full rest day. Yes, sorry. It's really important that you just look at your overall training program, because if you have to do your injury prevention and your running on the same day, and that's the only time you have to do it, then it's probably better that you get that done on the same day, because it's better to get it done than to not get it done. So in an ideal world, if you have the time, do them on separate days, and if you get DOMs, let that DOM settle down. But if not, just do them when you can, because anything is better than nothing when we're looking at not getting injured. Can you explain how shockwave helps with plantar fascia? I've had it and it did help. I can try my absolute best, Mike. Shockwave is still it's not a new modality. It's something that has been around for quite some time, but in physiotherapy and medicine and those sorts of professions, there's things that are used for a while, then they're not very understood, so they stop being used, and then something else comes into play. Now, shockwave is something that is currently being used by a really surprising to me large amount of experts in sports medicine. So that's doctors, physiotherapists, all those sorts of people. Um, I have only recently started to do my reading about it. And if I'm being honest with you, if I'm being really honest, I kind of dismissed it until a couple of weeks ago when I had patients with plantar fasciitis tell me that this had worked for them when they'd come to clinic and seen somebody that wasn't myself. So I've recently done my reading, and from my understanding of it, without getting too technical, Mike, is that plantar fascia is made of fascia. Is obviously plantar fasciitis is inflammation of the fascia which runs under the foot. Fascia is like the white stuff on your chicken breast. It's the really thick stuff, and it's hard to get through. It's really resilient. When you get a fasciitis or a fasciopathy, it runs on a scale, and there's like phase 1, phase 2, and phase 3 in the scale. When you initially get it, it's phase 1, and it's fairly easy to manage in theory. Some rest, a bit of targeted strengthening tends to work. However, if phase 1 isn't nailed, or for some reason you unfortunately end up sliding into phase 2, shockwave is really, really, really good at almost resetting that healing process and bringing you back into phase 1, where it's significantly easier to manage, if that makes sense. Now, the exact physiology of how it does that, I couldn't explain to you in any comprehensible way because I don't understand it. I don't understand the science of it very well. I just know what it aims to do, and I know that the way it does it is by sending shock waves through the skin and through the coupling gel into the tendon, which gets a inflammatory and a healing response, and also gets an increase of blood flow to the area. I hope that answers your question, Mike. But shockwave is a really, 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 really good tool for reducing the symptoms that you have with plantar fasciitis. However, the data does say that it is best used alongside a targeted strengthening program. So we can go back to that model and begin to increase your capacity again. Mike, if you have any further questions on that, please do ask. But I think I may have answered that one. How much difference do certain trainers make to injury prevention? Yeah, I opened with this also, and it's a good question, and it's a question that is on the forefront of many patients' minds when they come into clinic. Now, apologies to anybody that has heard this spiel that has stuck with me, but certain trainers are potentially more likely to increase your risk of injury if your running style doesn't work with the purpose of the shoe. Now, I spoke about this before in terms of pronation, where the vast majority of people that come to me come with questions about overpronation, and many of them have been to a shoe shop and have been told that they overpronate at the foot. Now, we don't tend to... overpronation is one of those things that is, you get told you have it, and it's not really significant often. Often you don't actually have it, it's just something that looks like you may have it. But yeah, when we look at the data of it, what happens at the foot, overpronation is, I'm using that because it's the most common one that we come across. Whilst it has correlations with certain injuries, there is no specific link to your shoe giving you an injury. Now, that being said, if you do overpronate at the foot and you have a shoe that causes you to pronate more, then you are significantly more likely to then become injured. So in order to assess but I think at that point, if you were over pronator and you got a shoe that put you into pronation, you would probably feel extremely uncomfortable whilst you were running. So you'd probably know, and you'd probably get pain fairly early on. So I think the best way to go about it is to get some advice from a shoe specialist, but really go for what's most comfortable and allows you to move in a way that is comfortable and doesn't hinder you in any way. Hope that answers your question, Andy. Any more questions, only that I missed? Good afternoon, Andrew. Thanks for joining us. Yeah, with a lot of questions that come in, it's often a case of the answer depends, and the best way you could get advice is to actually go and see somebody and spend some time talking about your specific problem or your specific area of concern. But yeah, there are lots of bits of general advice that you can do, that you can follow. I think we've been through. That's training on single leg, it's managing your load, it's having effective rest days. One thing that I didn't touch on when I spoke on earlier about the load and capacity model is that there are other ways than S&C that you can increase your capacity. Now, this doesn't mean that if you do these things, you should avoid doing injury prevention work, because that's strictly not true. But there are other ways that you really can increase that capacity, and they are things like having adequate nutrition, being hydrated. Being hydrated is really, really, really important, and it's something that you don't kind of link with your increased risk of injury, but there are strong links with dehydration and risk of injury. That's getting good sleep, and it is having a program that has been made specifically for you. So it's not just a case of, oh, I'll stick my shoes on and I'll run 20 miles this week and see what happens. It's having a program which gradually exposes you to that increase in pace or that increase in distance. Andrew, I sometimes don't stretch or use my foam roller, as I sometimes don't feel like it's helping. How important are stretches and rollering? That's a really good question. They are, well, first of all, I'm going to say that you can forgive yourself for not stretching or rolling sometimes. Rolling is like a more general version of massage. It's really good to aid recovery. The science shows that you can get a short-term increase in range of motion by rolling the tissues, because you'll get blood flow to the area. And there are some studies which show that you will get an increase in your ability to produce power when you roll. Now, stretching, I'm going to assume that you mean static stretching by that. And if you're not doing static stretches, it really isn't the end of the world, especially if you're going to do static stretches before you run. Now, static stretches before you run aren't a great idea, and I will come onto this afterwards. But when we look at stretching, if you're stretching in order to just cool down, then that's fine, because it will be useful in reducing your DOMs the next day and allowing you to train effectively. But if you are, that is where at the moment we understand that the benefits of stretches kind of begin and end. Because if you're stretching to get a new range of motion, if you've got a stiff ankle or something like that, then in order to achieve that goal, you would have to stretch into an extremely uncomfortable level for over 45 seconds at a time, or over 45 minutes in some studies, and you would have to be doing that 5 days a week. So to not be stretching, I wouldn't worry about it. It's not that important. However, if it's something you've always done, it's important to you, then obviously it's important. Now, I said I'd mentioned briefly that stretches before you run. I know that people are becoming increasingly more aware that it's not something that we advise that you do to static stretch cold, but it is something that is out there, and it's kind of like the knowledge. It's kind of like those bits that everybody tells you to do, like not eat cheese before bed. It's something that is kind of baseless, but it's common knowledge. Now, what we actually see when we look at studies where people attach electrodes to muscles before and then watch people perform, the people that stretch cold before they go and perform actually in some cases have a decreased ability to perform well by static stretching cold before they go out and do their thing. Hope that answers your question. But yeah, rollering is great, especially after you've ran or after you've trained and whatever you've done. It will really help to reduce your DOMS the next day and get some blood to the area. Also, you get to roll out some tight bits, which is that nice kind of pain. Anything else from anybody else? If not, I didn't come brilliant. Yeah, Andrew, use it whenever you can. A few days a week is great, but don't beat yourself up for if you do miss it, because in the grand scheme of things, it's not going to make much difference to you. Yeah, I didn't come with an agenda of things to talk about. I was just here to answer anybody's questions about their training and about their reduction in injury. So if there's something that anybody would like to know more about, please tell me. Are dynamic stretches pre-run a good idea, or are drills fine? Drills, I would say, are probably better. Dynamic stretches are really good if you have that acute sense of tightness in something, but once you've already warmed up and got your heart rate up, because getting your heart rate up sends blood around your body to your peripheral muscles. That's the muscles in your arms and your legs. That blood increases the heat of the tissues, which makes them more pliable, which means you're less likely to pull something. So warm up before you do dynamic stretches. Drills are brilliant because they increase that heart rate. The one thing that I'm going to recommend, and I didn't recommend it in the last question because it's something that you often have to be taught to do, is activation exercises are probably better than stretches to do before you run. So things like glute medius activation, glute medius is a really important muscle when you run. It helps to stabilize the pelvis, and you can do those by things like sticking a band around your feet, hinging your hips backwards a little bit, and doing side steps, where you will really quickly start to feel a burn. It's a muscle that recovers quite quickly, so I wouldn't worry about it. I just wouldn't overdo it. I've been advised to do lunges before I start a run. Is this good to do? Yeah, lunges are a good activation exercise. When you lunge, it requires quite a lot of effort from your glutes, hamstrings, and your quads. As long as you don't do them to the point where you start to feel really fatigued and sore from doing them, I think a few would be a good idea to start switching some of those muscles on. We say activation exercises because there's this thing where muscles are almost a bit switched off sometimes, particularly the ones in the glutes when we've been sat down all day, been sat down working all day, and then we decide to go for a run. The glutes are a bit switched off. If you then go and run, where they're a bit switched off, something else is going to work a bit harder to compensate for them being a bit switched off potentially. And again, those muscles which compensate, you increase that load and it goes over the capacity and you might become injured. So yeah, doing things like lunges and those banded side steps are actually not a bad idea to do before you run, as long as you don't make yourself fatigued. In my opinion, your lunges are probably better than a stretch. You're welcome. Anything else from anybody else? Oh, and thank you, Mark, for the question about dynamic stretches and drills. In an ideal world, you'd probably do drills first and then your dynamic stretches, but we've not all got so much time to add on to what is already a long period of time to go for a run. So yeah, I'd probably suggest doing a couple of activation drills, a couple of activation exercises, and some sort of thorough warm up. Andrew, you're very welcome. In my humble opinion, it is by far the best thing that you can do in an acute sense before you run to reduce that risk of injury. And yeah, I'm glad you brought that up because it's something that I didn't even think to mention. Doing often, and I kind of alluded to it so when I said your S&C exercises can also be things that you do pre-run, a lot of things that we give you as injury prevention exercises are almost activation exercises that you can do to a lesser extent as a small circuit before you go for a run. And you have then worked on those muscles and then you get your running. It's not only you, Andrew, that that would benefit from doing it. I think it's everybody. And previous, I think I was a bit unfair to stretching before. It may well be that the science has just changed now that we have studies when we look at muscle activation and running and the mechanics in runners. But the more efficient, the more activation you can do, the more efficient you will be, and potentially even the faster you will be across the ground. Anything else from anybody else? If not, I will wrap it up in a couple of minutes. And thank you for your time, anybody that has been with me. And again, sorry for the slight delay at the start. I've sat here at my laptop for about 20 minutes thinking, I'll go live, I'll go live, I'll go live. And then my laptop decided not to go live. So I had to jump on my phone. So apologies for keeping you waiting. It wasn't intentional. And one thing that I will say is that I don't want to, I'm really not here to push you into going into clinic. But one of the things that we do offer at Summit is a 15-minute free advice session for anything that you might be concerned about. And I do these, and it's an honest session. It's not something that you get told to, it's not something that you go to and we go, oh yeah, you need to come in for loads of work. It's something that if you've just got a slight concern and you speak to us and we go, yeah, that's really nothing to be concerned about, sometimes it ends there. But it just gives you a chance to get your question across to one of us who are specialists in this area, because it's what we do day in and day out. Now, apart from doing the bits like the S&C, the activation that we spoke about, and not being overly worried about making big decisions like, do I overpronate? Getting that specific advice is the best thing that you can do. Now, this has seemed a bit wishy-washy, and I understand that, but that's because I didn't have anything specific to talk about. It was just hoping to give you some general advice. Now, if you do want something specific, please do just give us a ring and have one of those free 15-minute sessions. If it helps you, it helps you. If it doesn't, it's only been 15 minutes of your life and mine. Andrew, you're very welcome. And if you drop the Summit page a message, which reminds me, and send your email over, I will fire you over some exercises which I think are a good idea for you to do also. And that offer goes out to anybody, like I said earlier in the video. If you want to message the Summit page and give us your email address, give us your consent to send you some stuff, and I'll fire you over a few exercises. But if not, then again, thank you to Rich and the Bolton Marathon page for having me, and thank you for your questions. If not, it would have been a very awkward time of me sat here looking at my phone screen. And thanks for having me. It's been really nice to try and help out.